Of course, engaging discussions. I think we can sit here. And guys, since this is the last panel, anyone who wants to raise any question, feel free to raise your hand. I'm gonna throw this at you so that you will be able to, speak into this, yeah? All right, so over to Francesco right now.
Okay, guys. Don't go away. We have the energy. And we are getting started with the third and last panel of the morning. And let's get started. So how many developers do we have in the room? So we kind of okay. How is the energy? Are you guys still excited? Huh? Yeah? Wait. Are you guys still excited? Yeah, very good. It's like I was yesterday night. Okay, let's get started with a quick round of intro. Michael, you wanna go first?
Yo, Jim. Excuse my voice, I've lost it after 25 meetings in a row. But Michael, co-founder, CEO of Abstract. Before that, I was at Activision Blizzard, launched 5 games, everything from Overwatch 2, Modern Warfare 2, and Diablo 4. And then just go way back to Ethereum seed round and working on ETH 2.0 when that was the way to scale it, make Ethereum go fast. And then probably the last thing in Web 2 that I did was commercialize Kubernetes.
Nader Dabit, the Director of Developer Relations at EigenLabs. We're the protocol, or the team behind the EigenLayer protocol.
Sounds good. I mean, it's a big honor to have you both here. We can actually touch infra, we can touch growing communities. One thing that I'm not hearing right now in panels or in talks is, what kind of differentiates building communities in Web3 versus kind of Web2. I just want to hear your take, especially on the abstract side, on the Eigen side. I mean, you're building developer communities on top of things too, but I think also on the abstract side, you're being also super focused on user onboarding, and I think this is also super strength. So you understand community at this role, and also want to understand a little bit what is kind of different compared a Web2 community building.
Yeah, I did a lot of community building in the Web2 space also. So I worked at Amazon Web Services on the front-end web and mobile team, and we grew our suite of services from a few thousand developers to, I believe it was 350,000 active developers within about 3.5 years. And then the tactics that we kind of used there were honestly somewhat similar to kind of what we do here. I think Abstract has done an incredible job actually of all teams really. Also, so I would love to hear what some of his ideas and thoughts. But at the core, it really is about people and kind of meeting people and getting to know them and supporting them and growing what you might consider a many-to-many relationship, because if you are trying to do all of the work yourself, it's just impossible to scale that. But if you find people, you empower them, and you have them become successful, then they're going to be out there advocating for you without you even really having to ask them. And in order to have that happen, you have to kind of meet people, get to know them, build relationships with them, make them successful. And in order for them to be successful, you have to have a product that's good enough for them to build something successful, right? So at the very core of building communities is actually nothing about communities. It's about having a great product, good documentation. Obviously you can go pay for a bunch of followers, and there's a lot of people that do that. You'll see companies that have 1 million people just responding to their tweets with random things. You can spin up these bots in a few minutes, but I think there's a huge difference between that versus actual advocates and people building valuable companies that are excited truly about the technology, that are building valuable things versus those sorts of things.
And you see already ecosystem building kind of resilience community, right? And I want to understand also, I'm following up here, this is an unscripted panel, so we definitely need to be unscripted here, but on the abstract side, what are kind of the lesson learned that you want to share here with everyone if someone want to build resilient community, but in the same time also taking account, hey, the incentives that we want to give, the rewards we want to give need to be also more long term?
Yeah, as far as community, the way that I approach it is I came up through hip hop and gaming, right? So it's those are two just general tour de forces, cultural movements, that really just shapes just everything from sports, entertainment, fashion, technology. And I think the common denominator across, I think great communities is really what is that cultural operating system that really has like-minded people on this common mission, this aspiration come together in the first place. That is actually transferable, whether it's hip hop, fashion, like streetwear, to gaming, to Web3. And as we think about community building for Abstract, that is essentially the singular mission of Abstract. Like, we literally call the blockchain Abstract because we're abstracting away the technology. Like, our value to Web3 is two things. We're answering like the decades-old question since the Ethereum launch, July 2015, is where are the apps, where are the billion users, right? And I think for us, it's we can contribute the largest on-chain community to the space that allows for these apps to like proliferate. And then there's like the deep tech that Eigen and ZK Sync and all these like go-to teams actually then go build. But I think for us, it's really just focusing on like getting like-minded people. And for us, it's really people who believe in the consumer crypto thesis.
Yeah, I mean, 30,000 developers onboarding. Like, I mean, obviously, like 1 billion users on the road. But is this the right direction that we're going to? Are we building siloed ecosystems? Not just on the user side, but also like interested in the developer side, especially because I'm in this debate around kind of like, Rust onboarding, then you go on specific kind of like other languages. I don't know, is the right direction to go? And then we want to also hear Michael on the kind of the user onboarding, abstracting the way.
I mean, I think the ultimate goal is just to have every software developer in the world want to build something with your product, and it doesn't need to be crypto, necessarily. I think what we're really realizing this year that we're going to be focusing on, we were just at Stanford for the Tree Hacks Hackathon, by the way. It's the oldest hackathon, to my understanding, or one of the oldest hackathons in the United States or North America. And like 11,000 or 12,000 students sign up from around the world, and they only bring in like 1,000 students, and all of these students are just like incredibly cracked, and like 99% of them like have no interest in crypto at all. Like they just like don't give a shit. So what has worked though is actually talking about like a software stack that you have cloud, you have AI, you have mobile, you have blockchain. And how can you build valuable applications using this stack and picking the pieces that kind of make the most sense, as opposed to saying, hey, let's build something in crypto. Instead, let's build something valuable. And in order to build something valuable, like let's look at this entire stack and try to create cool stuff. And ultimately, you don't want to have the user even care that it's built on crypto rails. And I think Abstract is also like getting there already, honestly, in a great way. But an example of this is zkTLS. So zkTLS is enabling a lot of really interesting use cases that the user is like going to the App Store, downloading the app, using it, loving it, shoots to the top of the App Store. Oh, by the way, it's using zkTLS, so no one really cares. So that's kind of like the most exciting to me. But often like when they're like diving into some of these like crypto native primitives, they end up getting onboarded through crypto like in a secondhand kind of way, and it's not like the thing that you put in their face. It just so happens to happen, and that's kind of interesting because then maybe they do start getting interested in crypto, right? But that's kind of my general take on all this, and I think that's how we've seen more adoption ourselves, and that's probably going to be the approach we double down on.
Specifically to developers, I think like the true wave of innovation in this cycle has come through AI agent builders. Like interviewing, and you're doing a bunch of those kind of like, I love the agent kind of like hacker house, the hackathon, the camp. Like I think the true wave of innovation in this cycle, and this is maybe an outtake, but it's not just about meme coin trading, is all about having kind of those AI agent builders, and the majority of them coming from Web 2 LLM backgrounds, all PhDs, and this is actually true innovation. And I actually remind me a lot of like when kind of like this DeFi summer was happening, that you had like true builders come in the space to actually like build financial rails on top of Web3. But I want to throw this to you guys, so please prepare some spicy question now. And let's hear Michael now on kind of like, is this the right way to go around kind of abstracting the way? Do you think user will have some future problem around bridging? It's not just about funding the wallet and kind of like interacting with the abstract ecosystem, but I think it's also about building cross-chain interoperability with other ecosystem too. But I would love to know your take.
I think you have to be very opinionated on just segmentation, who you're actually building, whether it's a game, an album, technology for. But again, like Diablo 4 is the last game that I worked on. that literally made $1 billion in 6 days off of female gamers ranging from 15 to 25 in 6 markets. Like, very opinionated. And Abstract is no different, right? It is not like the silver bullet, but if you want to go after, onboard a fair share, disproportionate fair share of the 1 billion people that need to come on chain, or that we've all been hoping for, the way that we look at communities, like three different cohorts. You have builders, and these are builders with criteria that when we look at people who want to build an Abstract, it's either you're an experienced team that can either build something that can trip over $1 million in revenue because you've built something that creates value for the end user, or if it's a freemium product, then you can trip over 1 million MAUs just because you'll get that 1,000 true believers really quickly. They'll share it with friends and family. It scales to 10,000, and it gets to 100,000, and on its way to 1 million. And then there's like a third cohort of builders where, despite revenue or despite not having MAUs, what you're building is culturally significant. Kind of in that like a streetwear hip hop sense, and you're kind of pushing the space forward. And that's just on the builder side. So just very opinionated on the type of builders that we're going after. And this is why Abstract is quickly bootstrapped about 471 builders that are kind of in the queue to launch. Just again, because we're hyper specific in who we're trying to target. And then what type of applications. It's like really just apps that are fun, right? It's everything from, gaming to creator platforms to tokenizing culture. Then on the creator side, which everybody sleeps on, like you look at Web 2, every platform, whether it's Facebook to Instagram to TikTok, like what is that built on? It's like built on the backs of creators, right? People who actually create content, right? And that's why you see streaming enshrined into the consumer crypto terminal, where, we're just whitelisting, onboarding constantly, 50 a day, to where we eventually get to critical mass, where you have this entire universe of creators that are, not only promoting apps that are, on crypto rails, but just in general, like taking what they were doing on Web 2 to Web 3 and actually getting a better financial outcome. And I think the last part is super users. And we're only targeting Gen Z, Gen A users with discretionary income. It's the iOS model. We could easily let it rip and get 10 million, accounts spun up. There's not 10 million people in crypto. So I'd rather go after the 100,000 super users that actually have discretionary income that will then spend money on apps and again, help these developers build sustainable businesses. And then it becomes this like wonderful flywheel between developers, users, and creators.
And you see really the culture focus and the gaming side when you onboard an Abstract. I think and I always was waiting for even ways to stream content on a much more kind of Web3 way. And just the streaming side is super useful for content creator. And I definitely see kind of the gamification side. So I think it's a great approach to actually onboard users that are not just in our kind of bubble.
And we call it the digital Disneyland of fun. Because that's what it's targeting, right? Apps. When you look at Abstract, it is not a blockchain. Yes, there is an underlying chain, but what it really is, it's Sony PlayStation Wallet meets Apple App Store meets Twitch on crypto rails.
100%. Any question, guys? Come on. Oh, there you are. Yeah. Is it working?
I don't think it's working, but it's fine.
So try again.
Oh, yeah, perfect. I think it's very robotic voice. I don't know if it's just yeah. So my question is because you were speaking about those builder you targeting 1 million MAU and everything. It's how you can support because I'm concerned about the distribution side, right? Because for example, if you have 10 projects, I know Abstract have a hub and everything, so you can push your projects there. And if you have a strong base of users and community base, you will be able to push the first 10 projects to maybe 1 million person for sure, right? But then when you have 20 projects, 50 projects, then 400 project or 431 project lines up to be pushed on this thing, I think users will just get lost, right? So how you can ensure that the distribution side because if you trying to have great builders, then you need to make sure they do have they do meet the users and the community. So yeah, just a open question.
I think when you think about consumer in general, right? and this applies to consumer crypto, there's 3 things that you need to get right. And this is what nobody in crypto has figured out, because I think most people haven't come from consumer or operated on a consumer app or product at scale. And it starts with curation, right? You have to get curation right. Like, again, like I have 2 small kids. When they get on the internet, they're not going to go to like a landing page with a bunch of links, right? They go to curated marketplaces, whether it's Netflix for content, to the Apple App Store, to Steam. And that's why you have the consumer crypto terminal, where we probably cut about 70% of the people who want to build, because we don't think that it's going to be interesting. Because you have to curate it to where there's a 1 in 3, 1 in 5 chance as you come on to Abstract that you'll discover something fun. If you're dumpster diving for content and apps, then you just spin out of crypto forever. Then once you get curation right, and then you have to get discoverability right. As you come in, and you come in because on the timeline is talking about on-chain heroes, you then discover Duper, and 77-bit, and all these other games. No different than, what the App Store is doing, right, in Apple. Like, I come in to play Clash, I'm not getting served a workplace productivity tool, and vice versa. So you have to get discoverability right. That'll eventually happen as more and more apps, go live. And I think to your point, the third part that nobody gets right is distribution. Right now, because we have this like go-to team of, Pudgy, Saigar, that whole crew, these apps will, as they come onto Abstract, they'll immediately get 5-10x, the MAUs that they would have gotten on any other chain. What we then are working on next is how do you then connect other distribution channels? And I think what you'll see, and hold us to this in the coming months, once you start seeing bigger and bigger global brands bring their communities, their user bases on chain. Now, they're not going to bring, I don't know, like Docomo, right? Like the Japanese telco, 100 million customers. They're not all going to come on chain. But let's say even 5-10% come on chain, that's one distribution rail, right? And then you have all these brands, whether it's like Disney or the NBA. Again, you start getting 1, 3, 5% of that user base on chain, and now you've created distribution rails. And then that's where discoverability starts to like help crypto native startups, where if it's a game, then potentially some type of integration with the Epic Game Store will be more helpful for them versus having like an F1 team, right? So I think you have to, just because there's multiple distribution channels connected to the consumer crypto terminal doesn't actually mean that absolutely successful, because you have to also get the discoverability right.
Let me ask you this. Do you feel that it's challenging to nail curation and distribution in an international market? Because I feel like every I would say marketplace that I use is often curated by region. Like if I'm in Asia, or if I'm in Latin America, or if I'm in the United States, I'm seeing like content that's given to me, and I feel like that's an overwhelming challenge just in my head. I've never had to build anything like that. I'm just kind of curious if you've thought about that, or if it's even a problem.
Yeah, even how you balance the rewards type and kind of building the resilient community, because sometimes people are getting through you like when you have like some very specific reward systems versus kind of actually really the top gamers coming for actually because they like the vibes, they like actually the culture.
I think the answer is yes if you're trying to go after the masses at once. But we're hyper-targeting Gen A, Gen Z with discretionary income. That generally holds true across, like, say, the 15 top markets. Like, whether it's the US, France, Japan, their general sensibilities in what they want is going to generally be the same, at least in this early phase of consumer crypto, where it's really oriented towards, like, apps that are fun. Once you get towards apps that are necessary, apps that are just fundamental, then that's like a much larger demo. And I think that's where you get these like cultural, like, elements in play, where it's going to get harder and harder to scale and be everything to everybody. And I think this is why we'll gladly send people over to Solana, send people over to Base. Just because, like, if you want to do payments, go to Base. Like, that is what they're, what they're doing with Circle. That's what they're like, obviously gearing towards. If you want to go dumpster diving for coins, go to Solana. If you want, again, like, this is why we're very opinionated on being positioned as a digital Disneyland of fun. It's like, Disneyland isn't the only amusement park, right? It is just one of many. So if you want to experience 7 types of specific apps, come to Abstract. And otherwise, there's bridges to all these other amazing ecosystems that we're glad to send people to.
I mean, I really like this flow, and perhaps some other questions, but how do we accelerate distribution and kind of like user onboarding? And for you, obviously, like Nader, how we kind of like accelerate developer tooling distribution to also a bigger size of developer? They're not just the 30,000 people from Later Capital.
Hell yeah, I love that. It's all about basically lowering the barrier to entry to just and making developer experience way better. And there's only so much often that, well, I guess it depends on what you're building, but for us, there's only so much that we can do. We want to make our contracts, our protocol, our SDKs very, very hardened and secure and work and just do all the main things. But there's a lot of complexity that goes into building, for instance, on EigenLayer in terms of going to mainnet. So we've seen a handful of really, really great teams that have built literal software companies on top of EigenLayer that make the developer experience better or different or abstracted in some way or another. So we're heavily helping those teams as much as we can and laying kind of like the whole gamut of things that you can use to build. And if you want to build something like layer 0, you might build from the ground up, right? Because you need a lot of control and you need to have everything in your own hands, I would say. If you want to build some like lightweight AI service that your application is going to use and it's not going to have a lot of complexity, then you might use one of these other libraries that kind of abstracts away a lot of that stuff. But I think you just kind of keep building these levels of abstraction to make it easier and easier for developers to build. And ultimately, the developer that's building with Claude API and that's building with Vercel, we want them to be able to build with us and the developer experience to not feel insanely different. And they don't have to learn a lot of new acronyms and a lot of new tooling and a lot of new things. They can just write TypeScript just like they've been doing, or they can write Rust and they can just build something interesting, and they don't really have to know about all of the underlying crypto primitives to an extent. I mean, there's obviously going to be sometimes things here and there. But yeah, I think it's just all about building out really, really incredible developer experience and making it to where people can kind of like come on board with their existing skill set, hopefully, and build something that's like valuable.
Yeah, and Michael, you said discoverability. This is a big and kind of like fat point there. Like, how you accelerate this discoverability? Because I don't think like paid ads to users is something that you want to kind of like pushing around Web3. Like, what are kind of the tactics that you think this will accelerate accessibility or at least discoverability of general abstract ecosystem, but also could be stuff like Web3 streaming on Abstract could be, I'm not saying Web3 could be streaming in general, or even like Web3 gaming specifically, right? Because all the games that has been pushed from big teams always are the kind of like accessibility, or at least like big like 2-3 month kind of big usage, and then like not just TVL but also like usability when kind of like lowered.
Yeah, on the topic of discoverability only works when you have a shit ton of users, right? Like, it's like, I don't know, like you go to a bar and you're trying to discover your future wife. If that bar is empty, that's not gonna happen, right? So I think you gotta first start with, how do you get the most number of people on chain humanly possible? And I think to the earlier topic of, the easiest way to do that is look no further than like mobile gaming. Mobile gaming got clowned on for years. Like Unity, the game engine that allows for a lot of these like mobile apps to be possible, that started in 2004. And even in 2008, when you had the actual consumer terminal in the Apple App Store pop off, mobile gaming didn't really take off until about 2012, 2015. And it was the change in the business model. Like all of us kind of grew, at least I grew up playing World of Warcraft, Call of Duty, where you spend $80 every year and get the new COD. And it's that model of like, hey, spend $9.99 to get this new, Angry Birds app. Like that is a point of friction. So the moment that mobile games changed to a different business model of free to play, where you just try, all of a sudden things like Candy Crush, Clash, Honor of Kings just tripped over hundreds of millions of users, because the friction of just like even spending 99 cents was gone. And then they had to figure out, how do I retain these users? How do I continue to, give them value through live ops? So I think for us, to be able to get to discoverability, you have to get a ton of users on chain. And if you log into Abstract, what you'll see is, yes, like it's really oriented towards just getting people on chain, whether it's through email, passkey, Google account. Now, I think what we have to then backtrack in working with teams like MetaMask and others, how do you actually then go back and, make sure that, kind of the degens, like folks like me that kind of came up through MetaMask, how do you ensure that they're not being forced to change their behaviors just because we're onboarding hopefully tens of millions of people. So even when you do that, you have to also think about there's a cohort of people that you might leave behind. So how do you backtrack and then service them as well?
Yeah, we're super keen in terms of like personalized onboarding experience. So like the idea obviously is that anyone is kind of like different. That was kind of like the idea also like behind kind of snaps, right? Like you want to extend the functionality of a wallet. Obviously there is kind of like an adding kind of friction point on the user side, but you always have, as you're saying, like groups of people that care about something more about like a specific category. Like for example, gamers, they want to just, multi-sign things. Security, they want to kind of like extra security layer on top of like interacting. But I totally agree on that. Do you guys agree on those takes? We have some Gen Z or even younger people in the folks. I'm feeling old. Do you agree on kind of like on this take? Do you see kind of a point of friction in terms of distribution? You don't need to just ask questions. You can also like, contribute to this debate. Any questions? There you are. Throw the. We have on the back after. Go for it.
You mentioned being the digital Disney and all this. Do you see that there is a need, or where does like IRL presence come in for adoption? And is that a piece of Abstract or any kind of crypto mass adoption?
When Burning Man in Web3.
Yeah, no, it's, again, like I'm a crypto geezer coming out of like early days of Ethereum. And I think people forget that crypto is really good at three things: making money, having fun, and making friends. And people sleep on that last part. And that's what actually makes all of these AAA gaming franchises just iconic, right? Is that I met some of my best friends playing, WoW and COD. And I think I met some of my best friends in crypto coming up through like the Ethereum seed round to working on ETH 2.0 to going to ETH meetup after meetup before it became like, super posh. It was just, just drinking at like a local bar. So I think that existing behavior in crypto where digital and physical are very much intertwined, really built around like making friends, coupled with what you're actually even seeing with content creators now, right? With like Kai Cenat. They're not gonna, like, after Ninja kind of, all of his followers didn't follow him, or, Aiden Ross didn't follow Aiden Ross to Kick. A lot of these like kind of these up and coming now established creators, they're very well aware they're not going to move off of whether it's YouTube, Twitch, wherever they're at. What they're doing now is that they're now getting into like live performances. Like how do they bring their viewers in these like IRL moments where it just creates this stickiness of not only are you having this experience, watching Kai Cenat play out like at the Hollywood Bowl, but now you're actually making friends. The moment that crypto can learn from that and build off of those early days of Ethereum meetups, it just takes off. And there's like that stickiness, which again, getting people on chain is one thing, retaining them is like the next really, really hard thing. And people actually sleep on retention. Like it's really hard to build something, as you're building apps, there's like 4 cycles to building apps. The first part is like the wow factor. How do I build something that just wows people, that gets people to talk about it, right? That's really, really hard. The next part is retention. So like everyone probably knows Midjourney. Everyone's tried Midjourney. How many of you use Midjourney on a daily, weekly basis? It's probably just me. And I only
Weekly basis.
yeah, it's like, but I only use it because I'm making storybooks with my kids. It's like a fringe use case. So even if you've built this amazing app and this experience, to retain people is really, really hard. And it's the same thing for ecosystems and communities. It's like how do you retain people once you've onboarded them? You have to have an IRL component.
What else apart IRL component you feel like for retention? Because I'm thinking about post EDG community. It's crazy. I don't think there is a lot of projects out there that actually maintain a good retention in terms of community, not just on developer side. I think Eigen is doing a great job in terms of kind of like post follow-ups, like how to build kind of another community on top of the virtual one. But I mean, if you look at games, for example, it's totally another story. Retention in game. And if you have like post kind of like TG or even like post kind of hype, retention is another dimension. So apart IRL components, and by the way, I don't think we have so many kind of like dApps really work. I mean, Farcaster push like all the Farcons, this kind of IRL component. You have different games, right, that are working, but people are jumping back off in Web 2. I'm even going back to Counter-Strike sometimes because I'm feeling like, okay, Axie Infinity is cool, but it's not moving forward like my necessity to actually go further. So what else apart IRL components you think it will play a good role in terms of building this resilient community?
Just great product. Like, should people want to use? Like, if you make dope products, people will come.
But you just said that creating the product, for example, for this game is not using constantly, right? So I could also argue that the product is not what is fitting. It could be also like updating the product, new features, like kind of like understanding what the community wants and building on top of that, right? Because, for example, you just mentioned the story, the kid story, right? If you are coming back, right? But maybe a lot of people are not coming back after 1-2 weeks. And I saw, even for myself, you have the wow effect, you continuing for a couple of months gaming, and then it's kind of like laying down because you're waiting for the next top things.
So so you're diving deeper into, it's like things like Pal World, right? That literally this time last year was like the talk of GDC, the Game Developer Conference, and then just usage fell off a cliff. Again, it's really hard to do what Call of Duty, it's been around for 20 years, WoW, and all these other goated gaming franchises. Ultimately, you look at mobile gaming as an example, it's business model that keeps people. I think that's where everyone focuses their energy around like building great product, which you should. But what people don't really realize is that in order to retain community, in order to continue to have the chance to do things like live ops, could you push out new content to community and your user base, the business model has to fundamentally be different. And the thing that mobile gaming got right was they moved from a pay-to-play model where I spent $80 every year to get the new COD to free-to-play. And it's not just like a free-to-play business model. It is how do you sustain that? So most goated like franchises, whether it's Clash or Candy Crush or Honor of Kings, they make billions of dollars off of a 1 to 3% conversion rate of its free players, and then they monetize the rest on ads. And someone had to perfect that. Like that wasn't like out of the jump. Everyone realized free to play is interesting. It reduces friction, and then it does retain people to a certain extent. But what really retains people is that core install base. How do you get that? And it's like this like art and the science of how much content do you gate back for that 1 to 3% that are paying to skip levels, paying for skins and all this stuff. And you just have to apply that business model innovation to essentially apps on crypto rails.
Yeah, I really like the answer here. We are almost on time. One last question here from the back that I thought like, I don't want to let people down here. Go for it.
Thank you. Great panel. Another question for you, Michael. So, I've used Abstract, actually signed up to stream there. I've streamed a little bit there. Kudos to that. I think that's like a unique feature that I was not expecting to see in Abstract that took people by surprise. How do you actually go out and then bring like those millions of users to Abstract? Like, as you said, the curation and discoverability is useful once you have a lot of users. You mentioned Kick, right, which went out and like signed these huge deals with streamers. I'm assuming that's not what Abstract's going to do, but I'm curious like how you're thinking about that, and also as a marketer myself, I'm curious. And I guess another aspect is, do you plan to like outsource a lot of it to the apps, right? Like let the apps build cool stuff and bring users themselves? Do you plan to like work really closely with them, or just bring people to Abstract generally and then let the discoverability take it from there?
Yeah, it's a good question. The way that we think about, and what Abstract is essentially it's a giant, user acquisition mechanism. Like when you talk to experienced teams, they don't want a grant. They want to bet on themselves and their product. And what do they need? They need users. Users gives them leverage to then go raise a round from a position of strength. It then gives them, the ability to then go hire top talent, which then allows them to get to, some exit of some sort, right? Whether it's token launch, acquisition, something in between. And so the way that we think about user acquisition is there's two parts. Top of funnel, where you're really relying on the talents of Luca, that goated Pudgy team, and we haven't even started this yet because we've just started with the crypto native audience. But once you unleash that crew, and these are guys that came up through drop shipping, they really essentially, as Instagram was in its early days, they really kind of created what is now influencer marketing. You give them budget to go after crypto curious people on TikTok, Instagram. They'll bring tens of millions of people over. And then where you then get with streamers is you start with the crypto native streamers, and then as you start bringing over Web2 streamers with audience, they're bringing over 1 million, 10 million, of their followers at a time. There'll be drop off because, again, similar to like Aiden Ross moving to Kick, there's gonna be some drop off. But again, like for Web3 standards, if you had a 1 million follower audience and it's like Supercar Blondie coming over, and she's only bringing like $250,000, that's $250,000 people that we didn't have on chain before. So that's a W. So you'll see this in phases where right now it's very organic, just because we want to kind of see like what the actual, like how many crypto native people are out there with discretionary income. So you start with going after all those people top of funnel, sending them to apps, and then you go after all of the crypto creators, streamers that want a different medium other than Twitter, other than what they've been using, where they can get tips. We can turn on other revenue mechanisms that are more familiar to streamers in Web2. And then you start introducing large brands as they're coming over building on crypto rails. They'll bring their audience over. And then once you get to critical mass, that's when you just give Luca marketing budget to then go after crypto curious people on TikTok and Instagram. And then that's when you then start cutting deals to bring, people with massive audiences Web2 onto Web3, because the economics are actually better for them. Like I can actually give them 90% of the streaming revenue versus like a shitty like 60-40 split, or they keep all their tips, and they're not getting tips in crypto right now because Web2 platforms can't do that.
I agree, especially rewards on chain. I think like it can unlock so much innovation also for content creator. Awesome, cool. Thank you so much, Michael, Nader. Thank you so much. Any closing words before we're closing up here? We're good?
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, amazing organization. Thank you so much, guys. Awesome. Big round of applause.